managing this programme called Wishing Well, which is all about taking live music into healthcare settings. I wanted to tell you this story actually because I've always wanted to say something funny happened to me on a Saturday morning, and something funny did happen. Last Saturday, I unexpectedly, and for reasons that aren't important and I won't bother going into, and I am absolutely fine, I ended up having to spend a little bit of time in the back of an ambulance with a paramedic on my way to my local hospital. And as we were sitting there, and I was feeling a bit unwell, on my way to hospital, we started talking, as you do, about what I do for a living, and, you know, he's just trying to chat to keep me occupied, I think. And so I started to tell him about the programme that I'm working on. And our work started at the Royal Alexandra Children's Hospital in Brighton, in the critical care area for children. And we trained a team of musicians to come in so that they could work right at children's bedsides who were spending months really in a hospital bed and really missing out on experiences that we would want every childhood to be full of: adventure and learning and making music and all those things that are important. So really the musician's job is to reduce that sense of isolation and anxiety and frustration and boredom that children can experience in hospital. And then I started to talk to him about the work that we're also doing, which is how I met Lucy Frost and Sarah West as well, in specialist hospital wards for people who are living with dementia. And I told him about the extraordinary impact I've seen where somebody who might be struggling with communication and might be struggling to understand what's going on around them and might be really struggling to stay part of the world, and who's really starting to withdraw inwards and to shut down a little bit. When they hear music that's familiar, that's meaningful to them in some way, the transformation that you can see is just extraordinary. People really start to connect outwards again to the people around them. And when they start to connect outwards, they might start to talk more than they have talked for a long time and start to remember things about their past. And music, I suppose what we're doing is tapping into the soundtrack that we've all got in our heads. So I was talking away to the paramedic, and by this time I've completely forgotten that I'm on the way to hospital and I'm feeling much better. We're having a lovely chat. And I kind of paused and just thought I'd check in and see what his response was, because I was expecting a little bit of cynicism or maybe a polite, oh, that's very nice music, whatever. And actually he was really grinning and sort of nodding in agreement. And he reached into his pocket and pulled out his iPod and said, oh, have a look at that. And it was loaded with music from the 1930s, 1940s and 1950s. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So he basically started talking about how he'd read about the impact that music has on people who are living with a dementia. And he started to think about the anxiety that people must experience when he goes to assess them, puts them in the back of his ambulance and takes them off to hospital. That's anxious for anybody. And we know that for somebody with a dementia, that could really be a challenging moment. So he thought he'd experiment with music to see that if he played music that was familiar to people, could that help reduce anxiety when they were inside the ambulance being taken to hospital. So he rigged up a speaker system in the back of the ambulance, loaded up his iPod with music that he thought might be familiar, made sure he had the right jack lead so it was all going to work, and he now uses music routinely to reduce anxiety in his ambulance. I just think that's fantastic. And I told him repeatedly how brilliant I thought he was, because here's somebody who's really at the acute edge of things, somebody who's called out to assess and potentially save a life, but he's also thinking about how he can support the emotional well-being of the people he comes into contact with. And then as we're driving along again, and I'm saying, well, this is so inspiring. Sometimes I think we can't see the wood for the trees. He didn't have to run clinical trials to do this. He didn't have to raise thousands of pounds in funding. He just kind of had to bother. Do you know what I mean? He just had to think about it. Maybe put himself out on a limb. Maybe a few of the other paramedics were like, oh, what are you doing? Playing a bit of, Al Bowley. But he did it, and it works. And to me, that speaks absolute volumes. So as we're driving along, he then said something which I talk about all the time. It was like having the words taken out of my mouth, really. He said, music's universal. When you think about it, there isn't a culture in the world that doesn't use music to celebrate or to mark periods in people's lives, to dance to alter our mood. And we all have these soundtracks, don't we? I think quite often about the songs that we learn as children and nursery rhymes and the first dance you chose for your wedding, or the songs that really evoke key moments of your life, and they all create emotional attachment. And that's partly what we're tapping into when we use music to create a connection with somebody. And then the last thing he said, he was just like, I don't know why music isn't part of care in hospitals. I don't know why we don't have live music and recorded music on hospital wards. So it was a funny experience for me, because I'm there as the project manager with the arts background running a music and healthcare programme, and actually this paramedic said it all more eloquently than I can. So in our work, we're taking live music making experiences to people, and our musicians might come onto a ward, and some of them play cellos, guitar, some of them use voice. We use iPads a lot as well, so that with the slightest touch of a hand, somebody can be making their own music. This isn't, for us, it's not so much about performing or entertaining, it's about doing something together, doing something with people, giving them that sense of empowerment. This is how we can use music to really connect people back to the outside world again. And there's so many amazing people that we've met since we've been doing this work, but I think somebody who will always really stand out for me was a lady we met when we first started working on specialist wards for people with dementia. We were working with Sussex Partnership Foundation Trust in one of their dementia wards in West Sussex. And we went in and we met this lady who was terribly anxious. She'd had nightmares and sort of night terrors the night before. You can imagine she was suddenly in this completely new environment where there was nothing familiar left around her, really. So her anxiety was terribly high, but the musicians managed to, it's like a bit of detective work sometimes, the musicians found music that was meaningful to her, started to play songs to her, and she relaxed to the point where, shoulders dropped and she started to make eye contact and she started to sing along. And from there, they were able to play music together. And then the musicians were able to allow her to initiate singing, to suggest songs that she knew and they could accompany her. And after that, they probably played music together for about half an hour. And after that, she said, "Your music gave me courage. I felt it here and I felt it here." And at that point, I think everybody involved in the programme had a pretty good feeling that we were doing something that was really going to work and was going to be worthwhile. And really what she's saying is she used music. It gave her courage because she used it to lower her heart rate, to feel less anxious, to have a kind of sense of herself in the moment again, so that she could connect with the people around her, and to lose herself in music like we all do from time to time. So the film you're going to see, as Lucy was just saying, it's an incredibly powerful film, and it makes a very, very strong case for the use of music in healthcare settings as part of care. I meet so many inspirational people working with the NHS, Lucy's one of them, who have this vision and can really champion the use of music alongside, it's like, part of the bigger jigsaw puzzle of how we'll support wellbeing for people. But I think there's a lot of work left to do. I think there's a lot of advocacy and shouting about how effective music can be as an intervention. So thank you for coming out this evening, and I think that's all I wanted to say, really. So I hope you enjoy the film, and I look forward to talking about it afterwards.